Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't introduced yourself in the Zoom chat, I would really appreciate you doing that. I can't see the chat in the app until I stop sharing my screen, so this way I can see you. So this session is called Innovation, Research and Improvement Professional Learning through Research-Informed Action Research. And I'm Elisa Belzer. I'm a professor in the Department of Learning and Teaching at Rutgers University. I have had a long career in the field and have really focused on providing and researching professional development. Also, I'm interested in adult basic education policy, learner experience, assessment, and so forth. So at this point, if you haven't introduced yourself, please do. I'm going to get started on the presentation. Okay, so oops, sorry. So first of all, my purpose for the session and an overview of what we're going to be doing. The purpose of the session is to discuss research-informed action research as an effective professional development format and to explore its opportunities and challenges. So first, I'm going to talk briefly about the research on effective professional development. Then I'm going to describe the Innovation, Research, and Improvement Group, which was a professional development initiative I facilitated last year. I'm going to give you some examples of projects that people in the group did. And then I'm going to share some observations about participating in this kind of professional development. And then I'm going to attempt to make this interactive. Unfortunately, it's a little bit flat in this virtual format and in this, in the way they have it set up, but there'll be opportunities to ask me questions, but also to share some ideas. Unfortunately, I don't think you can unmute yourself, so it'll have to be writing stuff out. To share some ideas of what this could look like in your context, what some of the barriers and what some of the solutions are, and then I'll try to respond as effectively as I can, given the amount of time we have. So here we go. Okay, so what do we know from the research about what makes professional development effective? The research is really pretty well established as far as the characteristics of high quality professional development. Although these characteristics have not necessarily been demonstrated in experimental research, they've just been reinforced over many, many years as really important. One of the things we know about professional development is that one-shot workshops are not particularly effective unless they're designed to simply present a specific behavior you want people to take up, very concrete, very specific, and very small. Oftentimes you can get that across, especially if you provide opportunities for practice and feedback. So practice and feedback are really important if you're just trying to change behaviors. But we know a lot of teaching is a lot more than about specific behaviors. It's about understandings of learners, of their context. It's about being able to really understand the complexities and to act on the complexities of practice. And so it's not really so much behavioral. So when it comes to sort of trying to help people grow and develop and change their practice in ways that are more complicated than just taking up one specific behavior, workshops are not very effective. They're really not effective at all. They might be effective in getting exposure or information across and getting people to start thinking about things, but they're not going to get people to delve deeply into changing their practice. So what does help? Well, one of the most important things is professional development has to take place over a longer period of time than a one shot. So it needs to be sustained over time. So that might be intensive, meaning many hours over a short period of time, like a retreat or something like that, and or ongoing. So it might be, a couple of hours session once a month over the course of a school year. It doesn't matter. It's that people need time to really process, think, share, problem solve, bring back examples, bring back challenges, and do problem solving. And so time is needed. And we all know that time is super valuable. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. It's very valuable and it's very scarce. Um, Very importantly, it needs to be connected to practice in very specific ways. So we know that there's a fair amount of professional development that's kind of procedural, like how to use this management information system or how to administer that assessment. But really effective professional development that is going to have an impact on practice is very connected to practice. And kind of connected to that, it should be very aligned with specifically identified goals, priorities, and initiatives. And those can be identified at the federal, the state, the local program, or the classroom level. And really what's going to hit best with practitioners is when the topic is really aligned with what they need to be able to do better and with what they're most interested in trying to improve. I should not talk about teachers as them or they, but what teachers and practitioners, tutors, instructors, and I'll say for administrators too, really anyone who's trying to grow and change, professional development should be aligned with what the program is trying to accomplish, with what the state is trying to accomplish, but also with what the practitioner specifically themselves are trying to accomplish because of a need they see. It's best when it's collaborative, and it helps to build strong working relationships because the kinds of talk that needs to happen, the kinds of thinking, the kinds of reflection that need to happen for people to make significant change happens best when it's done in company. And when it's supported and when people are going through the same things together, when people can share their experiences and problem solve together. This is great within programs. It's also great when it's across programs because you just get so many different kinds of perspectives that way. And the last point here is importantly that it focus on teaching and learning of specific content or specific problems of practice. In other words, it's really focused on what people are doing in their classrooms or what they're doing in their jobs. So what does this look like when research is really brought to bear? So some effective strategies or formats are coaching and mentoring because we think of coaching and mentoring as being over time, where there's many touch points between the coach or the mentor and the person who's trying to learn and grow, and also that it's going to be very focused on what that person is doing, and it's focused on practice. Another format that's very effective is teacher research or action research, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Again, it's ongoing, it's collaborative, it's aligned with specific problems of practice. Lesson study is really a kind of action research in a way, and this is where teachers come together to identify a problem of practice and then develop a lesson that they design to try to speak to that or address that challenge. Then one teacher implements it and the others observe, and then they refine the lesson. So in that process, people are learning and growing and developing as they identify the problem, design the lesson, observe the lesson, and come back to improve the lesson. And meanwhile, they have a really excellent lesson pitched specifically to the instructional challenge they're trying to address. Another format is professional learning communities. They are really most effective when they are data-driven by assessment data and or by student work, teacher work. It doesn't have to only be assessment data. And it can be practitioner-led. So practitioner-led data-driven professional learning communities really can overlap with ongoing teacher research or action research or lesson study, but it is a particular format. So with that, I'm going to move on. And by the way, if you have questions while I'm talking, feel free to put them in the chat. If you haven't already introduced yourself, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Thanks so much, and I'm going to keep moving here. Okay, so in 2024, I had funding from the American Association for Adult and Continuing Education and Pro Literacy to implement professional development that was grounded in those elements of effective PD. And I called it the Innovation Research and Improvement Group, which we affectionately called iRig. So I'm really describing this iRig to you as an example, as an implemented example of effective professional development. And this is not the only way to do this. I'm hoping that this kind of stimulates you to think about how you could do something that has some of these same essential elements without maybe the opportunity that we had. So the format for iRig was we had 6 monthly meetings. The meetings were 90 minutes. We did them on Zoom. And what the participants said is, knowing that they had these meetings once a month for 90 minutes, they could put aside the time. It was creating that structure and that expectation and the date on the calendar. So 90 minutes, not that bad once a month. And I think everybody can understand that when you think about, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. But we make time for things that are on our calendars. And the participants did, and they felt it was really worth their time. And so they were both able to make the time and feel the time was well spent. So our focus was what I'll call research-informed action research. I will describe that in a second. And the process of conducting research-informed action research guided the purpose of each meeting. So, for example, at each meeting, I sort of taught something new about doing action research, and then we had time to collaborate. So, first meeting, we talked about action research, what it is, articulating a problem of practice or the focus of the action research. Next meeting, we talked about how to identify something people wanted to try to address that problem of practice. So very specifically in this group, it was based on research because we were really trying to integrate research with practice. The next meeting was about implementing and documenting the impact of the innovation and then analyzing the impact and establishing the next steps. As I said, in every meeting, we had collaborative problem posing, brainstorming, resource and idea sharing, and that was always I think, the most valuable part of the meeting, because you can have someone kind of explaining how to do action research. It's not rocket science. That's fine. But the most important thing is people talking together about their projects and about their practice. In addition, I did one-on-one meetings with each participant once a month. So everybody found one other hour during that month, and I found one other hour during that month. We met so that I could kind of coach them through their projects. And then we also discussed how to communicate their learnings to others. Because the wonderful thing about doing action research is you learn something, the people you work with, whether it's learners or other staff, benefit from that. But often there's something to be said that others would benefit from too. And so we we did things like they presented at conferences. They are now, some of them have submitted papers to the Pro Literacy Journal, and some of them have even been accepted, and others are still in process. So who participated? You think, oh, that sounds great for other people. I could never do that. Or my staff could never do that. Well, we had a really nice range. We had teachers, program coordinators, a school counselor, an adult school counselor, and a program director, a director of literacy initiatives. And they were from all over the country, as you can see, from east to west and north to south, sort of. And then the group was led by an action research mentor. That was me. And I already talked about the support for this project. Okay, so here's a graphic of what is action research. Action research, if you're not familiar with it, probably many of you are, at least in principle, is basically a cycle of observing, reflecting, planning, and acting, and then doing it again. So the observing part is noticing something you want to, that you think needs improvement or fixing or could be done better or is a challenge in some way. So based on that, I know that the little headings underneath don't quite match what I'm telling you, but let me start from planning, actually, that green circle. So in the green circle, the planning is identifying a focus, doing what I just said, and then identifying what you're going to try, what your action is going to be, to try to address that. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about, oh, do I have a slide about this? No, I don't. About where the ideas of what you're going to try come from. I'll talk about that in a second when I get through the cycle. So you plan what you're going to do, and then you plan how you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of what you did. You're not going to evaluate the effectiveness using an experimental design, very fancy, but you might do observations. You might look at test scores. You might ask the learners or your staff, depending on your positionality, so that you can get and depend on your own observations. So you make a plan, and this is really the planning. Is a systematic approach to trying new things. I think we all observe, we all think about new things we want to try, but the systematic idea of picking something, one thing you're going to try to do differently, and making a plan for noticing how it goes, then making a plan for, I'm going to actually do it. I'm going to do it in these 4 weeks, or I'm going to do it in this class session, or I'm going to do it this many times. And actually doing it and observing, using the plan you made about how you're going to observe how it went, and then reflecting on it. How did it go? Is it something I should keep doing? Is it something I should modify? Is it something I should drop? Is there something else I want to try instead? And then you go on to the next time you're going to sort of go through that whole cycle. So that's the downward arrow. I really think that downward arrow should come after reflect. But the idea here is it's a circle and a cycle. So you go through a circle of plan, act, observe, reflect, and then you consider your next cycle of plan, act, observe, reflect. So we go round and round and down through the cycle. Now, what was different about iRig was that to inform the action that people wanted to take, they consulted research. They looked for an idea from the research of something that would speak to the problem of practice they had identified. And I helped them find the research that could inform them. Now, I realize that not all action research groups are going to have a me in that role, a researcher who has access to a university library to identify research. However, there are a lot of good research resources available on ProLiteracy website, through the journal, through their other research resources, on COABE's journals, by Googling, but you can also get, and I think it's great to inform the action you take by research, by using what we know to be out there as good practice or as ideas. But you can also get ideas of things to try from Googling, from conference participation. So for example, maybe there's an idea that you got by going to a session here at COABE, and you decide you want to do an action research project. What's the difference between doing that and just going back to your program with the commitment that you're going to try something new? Well, first of all, we know that we often go to conferences, get good ideas, come back with lots of things we want to do, and maybe don't do anything because we get back to work, we get busy, things sort of wash over, and we kind of forget about it. So that's one thing. Another thing is being systematic in planning this. So it can really help you get over the threshold of, I like that idea, I want to try it, to actually trying it, and to actually thinking, observing, reflecting on it in a systematic way, and then using that to drive your next plan. Really, this is what good teachers do unconsciously, and it's making the process more conscious, more planful, more systematic, and if you do it with other people, richer because it's collaborative. Okay, so iRig project topics. What did the participants do? So 2 people focused on student retention, always a problem of practice for all practitioners. 1 person focused on volunteer recruitment from a literacy council. Another support looked at supporting independent learning through gamification. Fifth person, I'm sorry, looked at how to improve vocabulary study and retention strategies. And the last person looked at increasing program participation in a family literacy project. So you see, it was a range of things, but very, very focused on what people were noticing they wanted to work on more. And if you want to, if you're interested and you want me to, I can talk more later about what what sort of problem of practice led them to choosing these as their focus. But you can see there's a lot of variety. They're very, very focused on practice, and they're problems that have strategies that you can try to address them. So what did people get from doing this? They engaged in research-based innovative approaches to learner retention, instruction, and learner engagement. And they got generally positive results from what they tried. I guess the idea here is they tried something and it helped make things better in general. Also, they learned a sustainable approach to improving their practice that they plan to continue to integrate into their work. So they recognize the value of this kind of learning process for their own professional development. And also their innovations, the things they tried, have the potential to have a broader programmatic and also broader than program impact in that they tried things that were not just important to them, but could change practices and policies within their programs at the program level or the classroom level. But again, as they presented at conferences and will eventually have their experiences published in the Pro Literacy Journal, the impact is even broader because practitioners all over the country can learn about what they tried. And even if they don't do the exact same thing, it can stimulate their thinking. It can stimulate other people's thinking about what to try. So at one of the conferences we were at, Tamar Samuel-Siegel, who was one of the participants, spoke less about her project and more about the impact of participating in iRig. And I wanted to share this with you. I spoke generally about the impact of participation, but I thought she just really did a good job of describing iRig and the experience of iRig and what it did. So she said, she called it a philosophical approach. I would just call it an approach. She said it makes having a problem permissible, necessary, and manageable. So I think in the culture of teaching, it's very common to kind of lean into your successes when you're talking to your colleagues or you're sharing at a staff meeting or something like that, which is great. It's great to share successes, but we all know we have issues and challenges and problems. And iRig, let's just say in general, action research as professional development starts from a place of acknowledging and even valuing the challenges we have in practice and sees those as the foundation of learning. So instead of sort of saying professional development is about fixing the practitioner, this approach is really about supporting the practitioner to be empowered and enabled to address the challenges they're facing. So it erases the idea that the problem is in the practitioner. Rather, the problem is in what we do. It's challenging, and we can do something about that. That's the manageable in the first bullet point. It centers practitioners as both experts and participants, and it spurs intrinsic motivation. So because it's collaborative, because we sat on Zoom for 90 minutes and people shared what was going on and then shared resources with each other, shared ideas, shared questions that stimulated new thinking, everyone in the group was an expert and a participant because everyone took turns in both roles. And it was very motivating to Tamar, and I would say to everybody, because everybody felt expert and not like there's something wrong with them. And because they were working on things they really cared about, and they came to really care about what everybody was working on because everybody recognized the challenges that each person in the group was addressing. I should say that in a program-based action research group, everyone could be working on the same thing also, but in their own ways. But in this case, everybody was working on their own thing, but everybody was really interested and recognized the challenge of each other. Um, and it promotes sustainability, imperfection, iteration, collaboration, and co-creativity. Tamar likes a lot of words. What this means is the changes that or the innovations that people made were not something that was here one day and gone the next, like often happens in workshops or at conferences, but rather people were thinking about and working on and trying out and looking at something that they wanted to try out over time. And the group was meeting over time. And so learning was over time and deeper and more sustained. But it also makes space for imperfection, for trying something that doesn't quite work. Let me try this. Or I have this plan, but I can't quite implement it. Oh, someone else in the group has a suggestion of how to do it. And the idea that we keep learning in iteration and through collaboration, and that this process is very creative, both individually and collectively. So, and then she said it does collectivism well while promoting self-efficacy. And I think you can get the idea here. The self-efficacy part comes from not being a practitioner as problem, from not feeling bad that you have challenges, and that you have tools and a context for trying to do something better, and that you have control over that situation promotes self-efficacy at the individual level and through the collective. So, and then she says, as a model, mentorship removes procedural barriers to entry for research and project planning and development. So what she's saying here is the role of the coach, that was me, really helped everything move along because I held the meetings, I planned the meetings, I met with people in between, I provided resources. I would say I played an important role in this happening, but I also think it's not a necessary role. All these benefits really could come from just a group deciding they're going to do this together and support each other together. And it was a powerful peer group. These people did not know each other before, and I'm telling you, they love each other. They care and love about each other now. And as a process, it really speaks to those elements of effective professional development. It was intensive. It focused on one issue for each person, but also everyone benefited from hearing from each other. Um, and it was very grounded in an issue that each person cared about deeply. It was sustained. It was structured, supported, and staged. And for her, very importantly, it interrupted her own tendency to procrastination because we had this meeting every month together and we had a meeting every month individually, and it just kind of kept her moving without it being like, oh my God, I haven't done this or I'm guilty or anything. It was just, we're all in this together. And I think that's the beauty of the peer group. Okay, and continuing with her observations about participating in IRIG or more generally being in an action research group, it really helps you recognize the importance of ongoing growth and learning, and really in a evolving way, rather than you go to a workshop, you learn something, you go away. Rather, this is ongoing. It makes you more open to being open-ended about your practice and asking open-ended, significant, meaningful questions. And it helps you get over the, I can't do anything about this because it will take too much time. By creating these very small structures of one 90-minute meeting a month and one one-on-one meeting, and you don't have to, there's no like orthodoxy about how to do this. As I said at the beginning of the session, this is to give you some ideas. It could be that you don't do the group meeting once a month and individual coaching because you don't have a coach. It could be a peer meeting once a month, like an accountability meeting, but something that creates a structure. You make the time because you have set aside the time. It's the setting aside that really matters. And it helps you be open to trying new things and seeing what happens because you have the structure, you have the support, you have this encouragement. So this is for practitioners, these 4 points I just said. If you're considering this kind of PD, um, you should do it if all these things. I posed it as sort of outcomes, but she posed it as if you are this kind of person, you will benefit from this. And I think that's true. But I think you can become this kind of person by participating, excuse me, in this kind of professional development. For leaders who develop professional development, think of IRIG as, she says, the PD trifecta. It provides mentorship, peer support, and self-efficacy. All good things. Self-efficacy is so important when it comes to trying new things. It creates what she calls a spacious container because there's both mentor and peer group have structure and time, and it's a kind of modeling by doing. So to solve a problem, to set up a structure for solving the problem, it's like this virtuous cycle. Some essential elements. So supposing you can't do what I'm talking about here, but you want to do something like it. I think you'll get the idea at this point. There's some essential elements that are good things to try to shoot for. One is, as I've been saying over and over again, just to designate a regular time for a group to meet, and then to have a structure within that time. So it's really important that either someone sort of facilitating creates a structure or the group identifies a structure they want to use, and also that they're leaning on a structure for the process, like action research. And that it be a collaborative kind of situation where everybody's in it to learn, to grow, to ask questions, to share successes and challenges, to share resources and ideas, and to mutually help troubleshoot and problem solve. Also, access to new sources of ideas. I mean, you can come up with an action you want to take without drawing on research, as I said earlier, for the action part of action research. You can come up with ideas from within your program by observing each other, by agreeing as a group you're going to try something you heard about or you've been wanting to try, but it's also really good to bring new sources in. So if you can't access a university library and you have trouble getting your hands on official research. As I said, you can turn to the COABE and pro-literacy journals, the conferences, webinars, and university libraries, just all kinds of sources for ideas, Googling. So it's important to have access to new sources of ideas, so you're not just stirring the cup around. Okay, so we have actually quite a bit of time left. So I'd like to start I want to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to put up the last slide now so you can see my email address. If you want to talk to me about ideas you have, but you're not sure, you have questions, I feel very passionate about this as an effective and meaningful kind of professional development. I'm willing and happy to talk to you. So please reach out. But now I'm going to go back to the other screen. I'll put it in the chat too. So, well, I don't know if I can put it in the chat, but you can find it in the conference app. How to contact me, it's just my name and that at gse.rutgers.edu. I'm going to go back to the previous screen. So the first, we can, I can take questions about any of these things or comments. So first of all, what questions do you have for me about doing research-informed action research as a form of professional development? And I'll take any questions you have. And then I'd like us to talk about, what do you see as the opportunities or advantages, or what do you like about this from your own perspective? And then lastly, what do you see as barriers? So our first round of questions is going to be just literally, what questions do you have for me? And I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see, more easily see everything. I don't know how many people are sharing their videos. Oh, I can't see you anyway, so I might as well stay on the screen. But I will, um, uh, sorry, now I ah, can't see. Oh, here, the chat. I'll go back to sharing the screen because it's prettier than my face. And I'll look in the chat. So from current slide. So please put in the chat any questions you have about research-informed action research as our first round of questions. I know it takes a few minutes to type, so I'm going to take a sip of coffee and give you a minute to type. Please just respond to the first question. What questions do you have about research-informed action research? I'm going to be patient and give about 30 seconds to see if any questions come up, and if not, we could move on to the second question. Okay, we have a question. I want to know if teaching to the test is so much better than teaching the content. Is that a valid research question for action research? I'm so glad you asked that question because I didn't talk about what makes for a good focus. So action research questions should really focus either on what happens when you try something new or what's going on. So a question like, is A or B better, is sort of like a very big scientific question that would be really hard to answer in this context. So that's a hard one for action research. But to kind of turn that a little bit, you could say you're mostly teaching to the test because you feel like you have to. You could say, well, it's kind of interesting, contrast teaching to the test or teaching the content. But you could say, I'm going to do test prep for X amount of time, and then I'm going to set aside 15 minutes of class time, and I'm going to teach to students' goals, for example. Or I'm going to teach, um, I'm not exactly sure what the well, anyway, and I'm going to observe what happens with student engagement, or I'm going to ask students about how they like that. That would be an action research project where you're trying something new and learning from that process. Or I want to know how learners feel about my teaching test prep versus teaching about writing, or I don't know, again, I'm not quite sure what teaching content means, but I want to learn more from the student's perspective. That would be a what's going on here question. And the what happens when I would be, I'm going to just try putting aside a little bit of time each class session to do something a little bit different and see what happens. Okay. I will also say, regarding the nature of questions, it's really important, if you're going to really pull this off, is to not ask something too big and not try something too big. We want this to be something that really fits into the context of people's work lives. So a small new thing to try, or a very focused question that you want to know more about from the learner's perspective, is really the way to go. So questions that are how do I or what's better don't work so well in this context, because how do I do X is really how do I fix something rather than what happens when I try something. There's nothing wrong with that question, but it's not an action research question. Okay, next question. What sorts of data collection did participants do during their projects, and how structured was that process? Okay, so that's a great question too. I would say this is a fairly informal process. People did interviews. People looked at attendance data. People, just trying to think. People observed. For example, the person who was working on tutor recruitment, she tried several things and observed, did it help get more tutors? So it can be really as simple as that. Did I get more tutors during this period than I was getting during a previous period? Typically, it's either listening more, like doing interviews or a survey, but the survey can be really informal, or looking, observing, counting, watching, and so forth. Okay, next question. I can upload my slides. Someone asked, are you sharing your slides? We're considering making an action research plan, action research a part of our PD offerings. I can share these slides. I can share other slides about action research. I'll upload them into the app. Okay. Oh, okay. Ahmed, I'm not sure I'm saying your name right. Ahmed was explaining about teaching content. I don't really teach quadratic equations because I know even if my students don't know it, they'll pass the GED math. Well, I think it's um, worth asking why you would teach quadratic equations if the students' goals are to pass the GED math test. But it might be something you talk to your students about. That in itself would be an action research project. Like, do you want to know more advanced forms of algebra, even though you don't need it for the test? Asking that question is an action research project because the answer would help you think about what to do next. Okay. How do you build buy-in with research-informed strategies for the sake of program and instructional improvement? I don't want to bite off too much too fast, but I see the needs. Okay. I think the way I created buy-in in this group was, hey, you've identified a focus. Let me see what or a topic, a problem. Let me see what I can find in the research that might give you some ideas about how to address it. So I think when it is very, very pitched to the specific area that people are most curious about, they may be very interested in research. Also, I looked for things that weren't too long, that were very approachable, and I didn't inundate them. I gave them one or two things or three things. So everyone was pretty eager to look at the research for new ideas. But I would also say that it doesn't have to be research. Action research doesn't demand, or it's not a rule that you draw in research. Again, a goal of this particular project was to increase research to practice. But also there are so many sources of ideas. So I would encourage people, either themselves or the group, or you as the person supporting the process, to look for ideas. So that, as I said, you're not just stirring the same tea in the same cup all the time, but are sort of bringing new things in. Okay, and Diana asks, can you speak to how action researchers' positionality or self-reflexiveness affected their conclusions? How do they acknowledge their insider status while collecting and analyzing? That is a very good question for academic research. And of course, we all have bias in every way in which we look, whether we're doing action research, whether we're just teaching and making assumptions and judgments. We didn't really get very deeply into that. People did their projects. Obviously, they were coming from a positionality that drove them to ask the questions they were asking in the first place. And that's acknowledged as, this is my bias. This is something I think is important. This is something I want to know more about. As far as looking at the data, like I said, we didn't go very deeply into it. I think people reflected on what they learned and heard and saw, and used that to help them think about what they had tried and what they might do differently next time. It's not like rigorous research in the academic sense. It's very applied. And, they could have a bias in what they see, and that could drive them to try something else. and then they would see what they see then. But I think the idea is that it encourages ongoing trying, reflecting, or trying, observing, or listening, reflecting, trying something new. It just creates a more purposeful opportunity to think about your practice and to try new things. So hope that's helpful. Yeah, there's a difference between academic and applied research, although some academic research is applied, but this is practitioners looking closely at their own practice. It's not researchers trying to create some kind of generalizability. They're just trying to learn. Okay, you can continue to ask me questions for that first bullet point, but I'd love for us to move on to the second bullet point, because I think this is really, I hope that my answers to those questions help you think about doing this, but I also think the second two questions are at least as important. So first of all, how does this strike you? What do you see as opportunities and advantages? Let's take that question. Actually, maybe it's going to be more helpful if we start with the barriers, and then we'll come back to the opportunities. So I'm going to change my mind here. Let's go to the third bullet point, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for me to respond to what you see as the barriers. And I encourage you to be real here. I understand that, for example, with iRig, we had good conditions that made it as maximally possible to do this process as it could be. And most times you don't have that. So please take a few minutes, think about the barriers, and be brave and put them in the chat, because I can help you think through, give you my opinion, and you can respond to that. So please go ahead and put the barriers in. Yes, that is off topic, Ahmed. I can come back to that. But let's let people type for a few minutes. I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to get started, or a minute, and then we'll start taking it from there. I hope people are typing. I can't tell. Okay, it's been about a minute. I'm going to say one other thing in hopes that, oh, here comes some barriers. Okay. I will say one other thing before addressing the barriers. People hear, though, and it kind of speaks to the idea of bias and my talking about academic research and applied research. People hear the word research and action research, and they think of people like me in universities doing studies and writing articles that get published in peer-reviewed journals and so forth. This is not that. As I was saying, it really is more like a process for learning and growing. So don't let the word research throw you off too much. Okay, now I'm going to go to the barriers. Time and money seem to be barriers for everything. Yes, I agree. I hope that I've addressed the time issue. If you if you make a time, if you book it on your calendar, you will find time. I know that that's a little complicated. It's complicated with part-time instructors who don't have paid prep time. So if you have people who are paid hourly and they have no paid prep time, this is going to be tough to do unless people want to do it voluntarily. And I know that that's a very hard ask. I will say, however, that if people find something worthwhile, they might be more likely to do it voluntarily. So creating buy-in around this is really going to be built around what you need. and you're going to get something out of this because you're going to decide what you need help with or what's challenging you. I think that can be a good incentive, but until people start experiencing it, it can be hard to sell. But if you have people with paid prep time or PD time, or you can find a little money in the budget to create that, even if it's a small amount. Like, for example, this group, they were doing it on work time, I have to say, and they got stipends, they got honorariums. It wasn't a lot of money. Um, I think that it was the experience more than the money that mattered. But I think some kind of token, even if it's food, like there's some good snacks at the meeting if you do it in person, or it's a gift card, even if it's a $10 gift card. I think something that acknowledges the effort and the time is really helpful, and we don't always have to think about, big. So, and the other thing is, some people say, oh, how do you can't establish the kind of community you need to on Zoom. I think you can. We did with this group. It's people build community when they really feel that everyone's talking about things that matter in practice. So there's not exactly an easy answer to that, but creating the structures, mm, not making it too often, but often enough so that there's continuity, and and building buy-in. So Ahmed wrote, how do you answer the question, why do I need this? I mean, if you remember back to Tamar's, if you're a practitioner, iRig is good for you if. I think people have to feel that there is something in their practice that they think they could be doing better or that they're curious about. I think even just building the idea that this is a kind of professional development where you can be curious about your practice or where you can share something that you're wondering about. It doesn't frame it as you have a problem or you have a challenge or something like that. It's more, this is professional development where we can pursue our curiosities together. So it doesn't have to be there's something wrong with you. That's one suggestion I have there. Okay, Alexandra asked, were practitioners or their programs receiving funding or stipends to do this? I did answer that they got stipends and they received permission to do this on work time. So everybody in this group was full-time, I must say. That's probably an important element here. We used to fund programs for this type of intensive work. We haven't done it in some time, and I don't think funding would be feasible anymore. So, I think it's a matter of thinking about what kind of funding you need. And it doesn't have to be grand. So I think people appreciate the opportunity if they can understand how it's going to benefit them and if they have the opportunity to use the time. But I do think some recognition, could be small, is important. Not sure if anybody wants, this is from Nadia. Sorry, I skipped one. I skipped a couple. Am I going backwards? Okay, okay. From Kenneth, not sure if anybody wants to do the work, but is interested in the results. Support, oh, these are the barriers. Not sure if anybody wants to do the work, but is interested in the results. Let me speak to that one and then I'll speak to the second one. So sometimes, even if you find a couple of people, I encourage trying to identify even one or two or three people who want to at least try it. If they start talking about the benefits for them, it might bring other people along. And there's nothing wrong with some people doing action research and sharing the results. Everybody benefits. But it might be that as if you go through one cycle, that other people will want to join when they see what it's like, when they hear what it's like, when it seems like it's really useful. So another barrier was support for the work from colleagues and administrators, applying the research in real life and not on paper. So this is immediately applied in real life. This is in real life work. I'm not sure if I'm speaking exactly to what you're saying, Kenneth, but That barrier doesn't exist because you are automatically um, doing something that applies in real life when you are identifying your focus and then choosing something you're going to do. So I'm not sure if I'm speaking to your point, but I hope so. Nadja wrote, I really think action research could be a great option for part-time, sorry, I'm scrolling and losing my place here. Great option for part-time instructors that have limited time and budgets. I'm sorry to be reading this out loud to you, but so you know which question or comment I'm referring to, I think it's good if I read it out loud. I had a teacher who was doing an experiment of how fluorescent lights affected her classroom and students. She never even heard of action research. She just had an idea and ran with it. Unfortunately, she couldn't finish the experiment as she got a new admin job, but I think the idea is so good. Yeah, that's an idea of there's something I want to try. I'm curious about it. And really, like I said before, in theory, good teachers do that all the time. Good administrators, we try new things, we see how it works. What makes it action research is the planning, the being systematic, and hopefully the doing it with other people. Although you don't even have to do it with other people. It's just so much better. From Tyler, thanks for addressing how, quote, research can sound intimidating. Working with a mentor, I bet would help that a lot. In a setting where it's organized more peer-to-peer, are there guidebooks for implementing action research that might help groups of peers interested in this? Yes, I would say. I would do a little bit of Googling or Amazon searching. There's a book by, I can't send a chat to you except I'll put it, when I upload, I'll also put some other resources. But there's a book by Yendel and Hopi, I think. Yendel, I'm blanking out on the authors. But if you search for Yendel, Y-E-N, I think D-E-L or D-L-E, and Hopi, H-O-P-I, look around. They have some really nice books on, they call it teacher research rather than action research, but I bet you could find stuff that would be very, very helpful. And Diana, framing it as a reflective practice is so accessible. And to Nadia's point, a lot of teachers are already doing this. I agree. This is just making it a more supportive and systematic process. I wonder if you can point to an educator doing something similar. You can use that as an access point to implementing the process of action research. Great idea. Giving examples, really helpful. So, for example, I can talk about the person who did the ESL vocabulary development. She was teaching vocabulary, but she was really interested in trying to get students to be able to study more on their own and to understand strategies that they could use. So she went looking and she found a number of strategies that she thought would be really helpful, and she taught them to the students. So she was teaching vocabulary anyway, but she decided to teach it in a way that was kind of more systematically aimed at study skills and study habits. Probably not explaining that super great, but again, it's just like trying something in her classroom that was speaking to something that was challenging her. Nadia said, thanks, Diana. I taught that teacher the term action research, and I'm learning it is such a common phenomenon that practitioners are doing really incredible things, but don't know the term or don't know others are doing similar things. We don't have shared language. Yeah, I think that's really true and a great point. And it sort of doesn't matter what you call it. Other people call it teacher research or practitioner inquiry or a number of other things. But the idea is to support it and to encourage it and to help people develop structures and systems so they can be more systematic about it and therefore get more out of it. The teacher I mentioned was working part-time as an HSE instructor and also had 3 to 4 other part-time jobs. I think she just likes being busy. Yes, I think that's true of a lot of people in this field. Okay, Tyler says, I Googled and found Yendel Hoppe. Thanks for the recommendation. And Kenneth says, thanks for sharing your insights with Action Research. We still have a few minutes left. If there's anything you want me to talk more about from the slides, I'd be happy to, or if you want to post more barriers, you can. I would love to kind of close out with thinking about what are the opportunities or advantages, or how, maybe even better than that, how are you thinking about how you can kind of pick this idea up and use it in your context? Like, what might you do with what you heard today? I think it'd be great to share that as our closing, so that people leave with some ideas from each other. So I'm going to give you a minute. I know there's, like probably a feeling like it's almost lunchtime in Texas, and you probably want to leave. But I would really encourage you, if you can, to think before you leave about how might this work in my space, and share it out. So I'll be quiet for a minute and hope that we get some responses there. While you're thinking about that, I'll just say I will upload my slides. I'm going to upload slides also from a presentation I did for Pro Literacy last week on Action Research that covers some of the same material, but not all. And I will also try to find a few resources that I can link you to for sort of guides. So Ahmed writes, I need to know if what I'm doing in the classroom really works or is just a fluke. I think ABE should mimic K-12 by being data-driven. Well, I think ABE is data-driven in a way, in that we have to do pre and post testing, and we can see how many people go up a level and that kind of thing. So we are doing that. But I think what Action Research does for us is a little bit different. It it encourages us to try new things and to see what happens, and to look and to ask the people in the setting about their yeah, I think we can do better than K-12. I hope so. To ask their perspectives on it. I think a lot of what is very valuable is taking the time to really see things from other people's perspectives, your learners, or if you're an administrator, your staff, by trying something and asking them what they think. Um, so I agree that we should be data-driven, and certainly Action Research projects can be informed by data. But I think Action Research projects are really kind of like more on a granular, focused, thinking about just, trying new things to address a challenge. I'd love to see people post about how they're thinking about this for themselves. I know people are trickling away, but it'd be great to have some inspiring, I'm going to try this posts. Alexandra, I'm really curious to try this with program teams as researchers instead of individuals. I love that. And a new tool that we've developed as the research and a new tool that we've developed as the research, possibly supplemented with other research. Selfishly, I'd like to see what kinds of ideas they come up with and share their work with other programs. That sounds awesome, Alexandra. Let me know how it goes. I love the idea of creating teams, because I think that creates a real layer of support. And Diana says, I'm not currently in the classroom, but when I managed ABE teachers, I could see how I could harness their curiosity into a more systematic approach. We tried this a bit with data teams. It gives agency. I think that giving agency is a great benefit. And I think Tamar spoke to it in her reflections on the experience. Tyler says, I'm always trying new things as a teacher. I would love to take this more systematic approach with some of that. I presented this year at COABE, so using this approach on some of those topics would be an easy start. Great. I think these approaches can also develop stronger relationships across programs. I think that's so true. I love the idea of, for example, maybe having an action research day in your town or your city or at your state conference where practitioners share the projects that they did. Oh, I'll answer that question in a second, Tyler. Where practitioners share the projects they did, what their experiences were, and it's like a great opportunity to have some cross-program fertilization. Love the collaboration leading to action. The question about IRB, for those of you who are not in the university world or haven't been or haven't done research projects, IRB stands for Institutional Review Board, and that is a university and also other institutions require this to ensure that research is carried out in an ethical way without any undue harm to participants. Our participants did not go through IRB because they were not doing formal academic research projects. They were doing a systematic version of what teachers do already. So we did not do IRB, and I don't think you need to do it. If you're doing something, if you're in an organization where you have to, then you have to. But I would keep this under the radar and just sort of call it something else if the word research is going to throw it off, because really what you're doing, as I think Alexandra or someone else said, is trying stuff out and being systematic about how you think about what you try out and what you learn from trying it out. Kenneth asks, how could I use this at Dallas College? I can see a standard curriculum being developed, published, and collaborated from the various cultural and ethnic language variations used in developing instructional materials and styles. I could also foresee this methodology used in bringing instruction together with the focus of, are we helping the students based upon their definitions, goals, and successes? That sounds extremely ambitious, Kenneth, and I think it sounds great, but I would break it down into smaller pieces. Maybe it might even be, I don't know in your program, but I know a lot of programs don't really ask about student goals other than what you need to know for the NRS. But what are people's personal goals? And what might it mean to have time once a week when instruction really turns to meeting their goals beyond whatever is being driven by WIOA? Or trying something that is more culturally responsive, sort of breaking it into smaller bits is how I would suggest you go.